Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm Mary Fran Johnson, your host for the show today and the CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media. We produce CIO Leadership Live with the generous support of my friends and colleagues at CIO.com and our CIO Executive Council. We're streaming right now over LinkedIn and Twitter, and we welcome all of our viewers to take part in the conversation today and send in any questions of your own that you have for my guest. We'll be watching for those questions and doing our best to respond during the show. My guest today, and I'm so pleased to have him here with us, is Steve Heindel. He is the Executive Vice President and CIO of Holman Enterprises. He is an IT leader with more than 25 years of executive experience in the automotive, financial, consulting, and technology services industries. As the CIO at Holman, Steve is responsible for designing and executing the IT strategy that supports 6 different operating companies, which together employ more than 6,000 people. And he's doing all this with an IT organization of around 400. Holman Enterprises is a family-owned global automotive services organization that's headquartered in New Jersey. It has 6 business operations that support diverse sectors of the auto industry, and that includes auto financing, insurance services, and fleet leasing. And one of its big units is Holman Automotive, which is one of the largest privately owned dealership groups in the country. Before he joined Holman 12 years ago, Steve was the Chief Technology Officer for Commerce Bank in New Jersey. And he's also, as you'll hear during our conversation, a great believer in lifelong learning and mentoring technology talent. He currently serves as an adjunct professor of C-suite business analytics at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. And one of the many things we'll be talking about is how he personifies a feeling at Holman that it is a learning culture. All right, so Steve, thank you so much for joining us here today. How are you doing?
I'm good, Mary Fran. Did you watch any good episodes of television last night?
Actually, I was getting ready for our conversation today, so I was just being a good little worker bee. Let's
Excellent.
set the stage a bit today with a quick rundown from you on those 6 different operating companies and how IT is organized to support all of them. I think of it almost in a sort of matrix kind of way with IT at the center, helping everything to run smoothly. So tell us how you do that.
Awesome. All right, so let's start with really the organization that founded Holman Enterprises back in 1924. So we're 96 years old on our way to 100. Third generation family ownership, working on preparing for the fourth.
Mhm.
So the sector, the first industry is the automotive retailing, and started from one dealership here in Maple Shade, New Jersey, not far from our headquarters, which has turned into a 6,000 employee multinational company.
Wow.
And the retail industry is primarily served from an IT standpoint through systems and platforms that you purchase, you buy, commercial off the shelf. So the size of the IT organization is more around doing support and integration. Although I will talk about one of the areas that we have Holman Strategic Ventures later on, where we're actually looking to build some of that technology within the retail space. But from the automotive retail standpoint, of the 400 people that we talked about there, there's about 35, 40 people, and their job is to really support all those applications, make sure they're up and running. It's a 7 by 24 type of situation.
Yeah.
So let me transition into, you described automotive fleet. That's on the different end of the spectrum. That's where the majority of the technology individuals are within our organization, and that's much more of a build versus a buy. So
Hmm.
the majority of the applications that we have are bespoke, they're customized for the industry. They're specific in many ways to some of the customers that we support. So we take the approach of standardizing where we can, but also specializing. Because in the automotive fleet industry, we support pretty much every Fortune 1000 type of company, and fleets of all different sizes. Fleets from a handful of vehicle all the way up to some of the largest fleets in the world that are multinational in nature. So as you can imagine, there's things that we can do across the board that make sense, but then we have to do things that are more specialized for that industry. So we support majority of the railroads in the United States. So just supporting the rails are a little bit different than supporting the energy sector versus a pharma.
Yeah.
So similar products and services, but maybe some differentiation. And that's where the development staff really comes in. From an IT standpoint, we have this team called Customer Information Systems. They do both pre and post sales support. So they're actually out there with our sales individuals, account management, and think of them as a combination of developers, BAs, solutions architects, and they're sitting there understanding, and then that's where they do the customization. So those are the kind of two bookends of the organization. There's another one called the Auto Truck Group, and they're very much aligned to ARI from a fleet management standpoint. They build a lot of the trucks and the vehicles that are specialized for the different industries that we're in.
Yeah.
So there's engineering that's done in there, there's manufacturing, there's fabrication. So as you described earlier, we're in the automotive sector, but each one's a little bit different. One's a B2B, one's maybe a B2C, one's a B2B2C.
Yeah.
We also do, as you mentioned, insurance. So we're an insurance broker. And then we also do some specialized insurance within the commercial side of our business. So that's even a little different as well.
Yeah.
And then parts distribution. So it's a variety of different things and requires just different types of solutions and approaches within the IT organization.
Right. Well, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about the best of breed as one of the platforms, and I can see how in a company like Holman you would really need to apply something like that, because it's not, it's never going to be a massive homogeneous business because you have so many different businesses.
Yeah, and there's also geographical implications. Being a multinational, going back to the fleet management side of the business, obviously we're in the US, we're in Canada, we're in Mexico, we're in European nations as well. So each one of those have their own nuances and challenges. And then we do a lot of partnerships. So as you can imagine, yes, best of breed has served us well, and it's been the right approach I think we've taken.
Yeah. Well, now I would imagine that most of the guests I've had on here, especially in the last several months, we always get around to talking about the business impact of this very long, drawn out pandemic that everyone is still dealing with and probably will be dealing with for the next year. I would imagine you've probably got a very multifaceted impact on your different businesses. What has been changing for you most as a CIO? Is there anything that has shifted up your priority list because of the pandemic, and how are you dealing with all that?
Yeah, I think for us and for everybody else, it was just making sure we can operate in a safe way. If you look at our 6,000 team members, it's very much a hybrid environment. So in the retail side of our business, as much as everybody says, hey, we're going to be able to sell everything online, that's just not the case. And that's not how people even want to do it in the course of a pandemic. I mean, if you think about it, a vehicle behind the purchase of your house, it's one of the biggest investments you're going to make. So there are some people that, without a doubt, that are willing to do the whole entire transaction online. And I think that forced the industry, anybody that was lagging behind, to jumpstart that. So that certainly happened within our organization. But figuring out how to work in this hybrid environment where you have individuals that have to go to the office every day, work from home, and we're split. We're about 50-50 because the Auto Truck Group, they do a lot of manufacturing, so they have to be there. They're bending metal, they're doing engineering, they have to be physically attached to the vehicles. Right. Similar in the retail business, we do a ton of maintenance in those retail shops. So we have 35 brick and mortar retail dealerships throughout the United States that require people to be there. Conversely, we have a large workforce that can work from anywhere. And our call center, for example, a little over 350 people worldwide, we were able to get them working all remotely. So this is definitely impacting the way that we're going to, and I'm sure everybody else, how we're going to work in the future. Where does it make sense? And then it has implications on business continuity, business recovery, what you're doing with leases, buildings, you name it. So all these things have come into play, and it's part of our planning in the next several years.
Right. So if you had to pick one thing that is now a higher priority for you as a CIO, I'm guessing it might be the people and the productivity angles, but you tell me.
I think everything's a priority. That's the interesting thing with our business.
Mhm.
The term I like to use is stratactional, be strategic, tactical, and operational. So we always have to have an eye for the future as a CIO, right? We have to think about the next 3, 6, 9 months from a tactical standpoint, do the blocking and tackling each and every day. So they're all priorities and aligning our organization to support each and every one. But obviously, when the crisis truly hit and everybody started getting working remotely, it was all about safety, and safety is still a primary concern. That's a big part of my job, is making
Yeah.
sure we can support our team members that can operate safely as well as our customers.
Well, and I know you and I talked about that before, and I just have to weigh in and say that as an editor, trying to combine the word of strategic, tactical, and operational in one term, I'm going to have to veto that. Nobody will be
10 times.
Nobody will be able to pronounce it. But it actually reminds me of the three-legged stool that we talked about, that the way you look at your IT organization is also operations, development, and product management. And so you have essentially a kind of a centralized or a federated model.
Yeah, it's definitely federated within the organization. So IT is centralized, and we have competencies without our organization,
Yeah.
but it's federated from the standpoint you described. Those different businesses, they're aligned. So we'll have a development manager that's aligned to, let's just say, retail, or a development manager that's aligned to within ARI, and then there's segments within ARI. There could be what we do with fleet, what we do with customer facing technologies, what we're doing with the ordering of vehicles and the support of vehicles. And then we very much align with the individuals in operations and product management. So getting back to our stratactional term, we like to take a good 6-month look back, and then a 6-month to a more forward look ahead. And we have our metrics that are assigned to that view. And as I said to you, we look at everything from how are we going to generate revenue and move the needle? What can we do from an efficiency standpoint? An employee and customer engagement and things that we have to do for the societal benefit. That's all viewed as well. And then obviously risk and compliance. So we are an industry that is heavily regulated, and depending upon which industry that we're supporting, we have to adhere and support their regulations as well. So we like to cast a nice net to understand all the different business aspects.
Yeah.
And then we as a team collectively know what our priorities are, which are great because that helps. And we can measure each other on it. And what's good there, and what I really like to emphasize and stress, Holman being an organization that's been around for 90 plus years, we have a lot of loyalty and longevity within the organization. And that really comes up in spades because it takes time to get to know these businesses. So if
Yes.
you look at Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, doing something for 10,000 hours, it's the combination of those three disciplines working together. It's I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's hard to find a unicorn that really knows the operations,
Yes.
where the products are, where we're going in industry, and how to leverage the technology. So that's what's great. We have teams that have worked together for a long time. And what's great about these teams, and it's our culture. And there's a book I'll reference later where good ideas come from. And there's a term in there called liquid networks, but these teams are constantly interacting with other teams. So they're sharing ideas, thoughts, opinions,
Huh?
and there might be an initiative that goes across function, and these teams do a good job of interacting and
Yeah.
share where these cross-functional challenges are.
One of the things I mentioned when I was introducing you, I was talking about how much you enjoy Holman because it has such a learning culture. And I'm always very interested in the cultural aspects of organizations. I mean, that's where the people all live. That's what it impacts how well you can do in attracting the technology talent you need. And so when you say that Holman Enterprises is a learning culture, give me some examples of what do you mean by that? I mean, is that more than marketing speak? I guess
Yeah, it's more than marketing speak. Definitely, there's budget associated with it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an organization which is phenomenal,
Mhm.
100% tuition reimbursement, and people take advantage of it. Creativity is an ideas. There's things like we've done in the past, a Shark Tank where everybody participates and think about different ways to bring your ideas and thoughts to the table. Just the investments, the fact that, and we'll talk a little bit more about home and strategic ventures, but having individuals set aside to challenge the status quo. And I think that's the biggest thing about the learning culture. It's never resting, and knowing that your trajectory is not just today. We talk about, our strategies, and just for the next 5 years, it's for the next generation and 50 years. So in order to do that, you need to be relevant and never rest on your laurels. So part of our learning is nice creative conflict where we professionally challenge each other and try to learn from each other. We're a big fail fast forward organization, and you just take the opportunity. And the good news is you make a mistake, you learn, and you move on from it. So yeah, it's not a marketing term. It's how we work.
Well, and I know it's very real life for you as well, because in addition to being an adjunct professor at St. Joseph's, you're also working on your own doctoral degree. Talk about that, because that connects us into the transportation grid and telematics and connected cars. Tell me more about what you're doing in that realm.
Yeah, so the field of study, and it's very much aligned to our organization, is what I'm calling the network-centric transportation grid. And it's just a nice academic way of saying the term that's out there is ACES. It's autonomous, connected, electric, shared. It's just another way of saying that. But think of the business that we're in. Our business is centered around the internal combustion machine that's operated by a human being. In the future, if this actually goes away, we could have a different propulsion technology. So going from gas powered to electric.
Yeah.
And instead of being operated by a human being, it could be operated by something other than a human being, or a combination. So it could be all developed, programmed behind the scenes. And part of our challenge as an organization is we want to be relevant for future generations to come. So that gets back to the transactional side. You ask me, yeah, it's part of my job too, and all of our jobs in leadership, is how are we going to be relevant for the future, but also trying to understand what the future might bring. You look at California, and pay attention there, because they're usually the state that sets the precedence, or they're willing to make those leaps. But 2035, governor, they're projecting no more internal combustion machines to be sold. Part of this study is to see what's realistic. There's lots of, I think, good aspirational proclamations that people want, and you do need to aspire, but there's also some of the realistic and practicality side of it.
Yeah.
Can you generate enough energy? The algorithms that get created, who's going to regulate them? Who's going to handle the ethics behind these types of things? Can you truly secure them? What do you do if you do have a network outage? We live in the critical infrastructure. Big part of what Holman does, and this was part of the pandemic, was keeping the critical infrastructure going. So all these things come into play because we want to be in a great position. If and when that happens, we're ready to make that transition, or help organizations make those transition if and when that technology changes.
Okay, good. And since you brought it up, and I think we ought to touch on a bit of an overview on your approach to cybersecurity. And I know that that's always it's a fraught topic with a lot of CIOs, because there's so much involved in it. And I definitely don't want to try to drag us into the weeds on it. But I wonder, when we think about that network grid, and also, the fact that you've got a development organization and now so many people are working from home and so forth. So do what you can to kind of describe how you approach cybersecurity, and if anything has changed dramatically with the onset of this working from home and the pandemic realities, then get into that too.
Yeah, just cybersecurity in general. I think you need to be very humble. Never take anything for granted. This is
advice.
It's and continuous. I would say continuous awareness and training throughout the organization. So we'll go back this learning culture. Myself and another individual, we went back. We just finished it up, but we did a master's in cybersecurity at a local university here.
Yeah,
and everybody on the team, on our security team, has achieved either an undergrad or advanced degree under CISPs. So it's just important to stay relevant, to stay current, and that's to be humble and the continuous awareness and training. And it's not just obviously within the IT organization, it's throughout the company. So it's really important. I was mentioned to you at a different time, Mary Fran, is some of the studies on innovation and how companies that get impacted with their creativity and innovation,
Yeah.
if and when a cyber attack happens, because it makes sense. The company now is going to pivot. They're going to do everything they can to shore things up, and that can really impact you going forward. So cyber is really important to have a good balance. That's why when we talked about that three-legged stool
Yeah.
and looking at product management, risk and compliance should always be part of the conversation. I'm not saying dominate it, but certainly be part of it so it's understood. We
Yeah.
have a saying here, get stuff done. I'll use the stuff instead of the other word, but I like to put the Q in there as well. Get quality stuff done when we want to roll it out. And a big part of that is security. I think all of our challenges front and center is things around ransomware. And it's one thing getting the ransom where you actually have to pay it. The big issue though is if it's on one computer, that's bad. Imagine it if it's on every computer in your environment, not only on your primary, but on your backups.
Mhm.
So this has happened to companies, and this is probably the number one cause now for disasters in business recovery. So
Mhm.
cyber is much more than just a buzzword. It's really important to do business, and it's critical that it's part of every roadmap, and there's ample dollars and appreciation, and just be humble and do the basics.
Yeah.
Patch, patch, patch,
Mhm.
patch. Follow all the basics. We won't get into all the weeds, but there's best practices that really everybody should follow, and it should be part of every risk committee. If there's a risk committee, make sure you got good audit oversight and making sure those things are getting done.
Yeah. Well, you'd mentioned when we talked earlier that at the board level for Holman Enterprises, you have a technology committee,
Mhm.
and that actually is relatively rare for the board of directors to have a standing tech committee.
Well, that goes into the learning culture. You have a very engaged, inquisitive leadership organization. And
Yeah.
I think that's critical. They want to listen, they want to learn, they know the importance.
Mm.
So yeah, it's great. As I said, our head of security here, gentleman, he does his roadshow every year. And what's great, not only in the technology committee where we do it, we'll spend a decent amount of time outside. So you can have that one-on-one conversation, ask clarifying questions,
Mhm.
interact a little bit. And it's great for us because it's an awesome learning experience where either how we need to frame a message or there's things that maybe we haven't thought of that you're getting a different perspective. Maybe
Mhm.
there's a risk or a regulatory concern or something that's going on somewhere else in the business. So I
Yeah.
think that's really important, having that engagement where you're not only doing it on the formal side, you do it one off, but then you can have those informal conversations as well. And it's great. You even say it. You'll see
Yeah.
emails come in from executives say, "Hey, is this an issue here? I just read this." So you're getting that buy-in all the way around.
I heard a wonderful idea some years ago at one of my CIO Perspectives events that we did, and I think we were in Houston or Atlanta. And one of the CIOs on a panel was describing how every time he saw a cybersecurity incident of some sort get in the mail, he would do kind of a news flash one pager that he would send to the CEO, the senior management committee, and the board. And it would basically lay out the here's what happened, here's how we're protected against it, here's what we would do if it happened to us. And it was such a simple but effective communication device.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great idea. That's a real-time, almost mini tabletop test to say. And
Yeah.
I love it. We have a little saying here. We want to share, we don't want to scare, but you do need to do a little bit of both.
Yeah. Now, we have a question from our audience. As a matter of fact, if you're just joining us now, this is CIO Leadership Live, and I'm here talking to Steve Heindel, who is the EVP and CIO of Holman Enterprises, a big automotive services business based in New Jersey. And please send in your questions. I have got Steve here with me for more than another half hour, and we will try to get to them. Now, this question that we have, it is a little bit broad. The question is basically, what are the technologies you're using? That's a little hard to frame when you've got six operating companies, but do you have a bigger technology architecture platform that,
Well, this is it's a great question. It's a relevant one because we're actually covering this in our technology committee coming up in a couple of weeks.
oh, perfect. All right.
And the I guess analogy we're making is if you've ever seen it, you can Google it out there. There's the stack. So if we look at our stack from the different layers, customer or user interface, application, system, and infrastructure,
Okay.
a nice rendition of a hamburger out there with the buns. So you kind of got the UI up top, and you've got the infrastructure below and the stuff in between.
Okay.
So as part of that dialogue is to go through the different businesses, and as you can imagine, a 96-year-old company, we're in just different, I would say, maturity levels and
Different
value
cycles
of these
of
different
innovation.
systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of these systems are very much aligned to a business. So, for example, the auto truck group, it's a niche bespoke industry where there's a platform that we all leverage in that industry. So that runs on a certain stack. Where what we're doing maybe in home and strategic ventures, we're leveraging more, I would say, contemporary technology. And then there's a little bit of everything else in between. So from a broad standpoint, we do what makes good business sense.
Hmm.
One of the things you'll find, at least I found in my career, you could have legacy. And by the way, I would argue after a couple of years, it's all legacy once it's in play. But when you get it working the way you want to, and especially if you can customize it and build it yourself,
Hmm.
if you have to buy something and then build around it, it can be very, very, very expensive. So
Yeah.
it's that balancing act. It's how do you stay relevant or up to speed on what's the latest or the newest versus leverage what you have. So yeah, there's some code that's decades old that just makes sense that runs their business, and there's other code that needs to be refreshed and changed more often.
Hmm.
Usually, the determining factor, I think we all have this challenge, is can you secure it? Can you support it in such a way that you can make sure that you can manage your environment, secure your environment? So no, we're going through this exact dialogue with the technology committee, and the big part of that is just to explain to all of us
Yeah.
is what does it take to manage and support it?
Hmm.
And I always go back to if there's business value, if we can drive the revenue out of it, I don't care if we have 20 stacks. It's all about what business value you get out of it.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a reason to rationalize and bring things together, then there's business value out of that too. But if you ask mostly any CIO, I would venture to guess their number one goal is how do they grow the business, right?
Yes, exactly. The thinking strategically about the business. And one of the, I remember a CIO some years ago making a point. I think we were talking about ERP systems and enterprise resource planning systems. And he said that whenever he's talking to his business colleagues or to the board, you envision it like a big iceberg. And he said everybody wants to talk about that snowy, cute part on the top of it where the penguins are dancing around and everyone's having a good time. But the part of the iceberg under the water is your legacy systems. And when you think about the kind of changes companies have made in their digital transformation work over the last few years, they have now fueled the way most businesses have been able to pivot and deal with the pandemic. It's those kind of changes. If you were to talk about digital transformation and how you have approached it at Holman, what would your lecture be there to your students at St. Joe's?
Yeah, this is another topic of conversation we have within our organization. Just to
Hmm.
simplify it, there's really, to me, it's three basic aspects. It's the channels. So
Hmm.
how do you want to interact? And mind you, there's things that we want to do digitally, but there's things that we want to do face to face and belly to belly as well. So think about our automotive retail.
Hmm.
There's so much you can put on the experience online, and there's different type of experience if you have that interaction face to face. So
Hmm.
as much as you might want to automate and give that capability, there's the other element that it's also great to have that face to face conversation just because you can't build every single aspect. I mean, financial services has gone through this with fintech. And if you think about it, all the banks and thrifts that are out there, there's been tons and tons and tons of money. And it makes sense where you have, I would say, a more structured transaction.
Hmm.
If you're buying a car or buying a house or whatever it might be, it can be structured, but there's also well, how does this feature really work? Or let me sit in it and see how comfortable I am. And you need that human interaction or touching and feeling the object. So when we say digital, we're still dealing with a very physical kinetic object. So it's not completely a digital, but from a channel standpoint, we can do that. So I would say you look at the channels up top, and then the big part for me is the routing, because underneath it is the fulfillment where you can digitize,
Hmm.
but they're very expensive. It's very difficult to sit there and say, I've got all this intellectual property or knowledge or know-how wrapped up in the system. And
Hmm.
it's very difficult, if not impossible, to make a business case to say, I'm going to replace that.
Yeah.
What's more reasonable is how do I route information between our fulfillment systems, other fulfillment systems, and then what are the channels? How do we interact? And that's something we talk about quite a bit, going from machine to machine communication on one part of the spectrum, all the way over to human to human interaction, and
Right.
then the stuff in between. And then you really have to go through and play it out and see what makes sense for your business and what you're trying to accomplish,
Yes.
and who your mark. So what's interesting, Mary Fran, I mean, this was the experiment, especially in the automotive industry. Hey, this pandemic, god awful thing happened, but now everybody's testing real world. How much is going to go digital? And the reality is, a lot of transactions still happen, at least, but up to a certain point. You're
Right.
getting everybody coming and they want to buy and see the vehicle.
Hmm.
So
Well, we talked about, because I expected you to tell me that you'd had a huge uptick in online demand on the car buying side, but you said it's still pretty much single digits. It's not.
yeah, it didn't move the needle a ton. I mean, there's certainly an uptick, but
Hmm.
I just don't know if we're there ready to yet. I mean, think about it. Think about retailing in general. What's the percentage of transactions are online versus on person?
Right.
It's still in the teens. I mean, you're in the 15% range at best, and that's for you to order a book like this to come to your house, right? Uh, little bit different environment when we're dealing with just very big pieces of equipment that are expensive that people want to see, feel, and touch and understand.
Yeah. Well, and I have another question from our alert audience out there, and you'll have to help me interpret this a little bit. How much impact did you have on the automotive delivery cycle? Or, and I think that that's, what kind of impact does technology have? It may also be partly referring to the impact from the pandemic on the delivery cycle. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. In the automotive industry, think about it when the pandemic came.
hmm.
You look at the workflow from building a vehicle to delivering a vehicle and all the specking that goes in front. And there's a lot of moving parts. And if something is gone awry, that impacts the whole cycle. So the auto truck group, for example, that builds these vehicles, one of the determinants was we need to get the equipment from the manufacturers, the chassis, or we need to get the parts. So what we've seen is March, April, May, certainly a slowdown, and then a ton of pent up demand and through the roof. We even saw that within the retail side of the business. And
Hmm.
some of it was due to lockdowns, obviously, for all the concerns people had too. They were just, people are rightfully so afraid to maybe go out and do those types of transactions, whether it was economic, whether it was health reasons, whatever it might be. And I think there's been maybe just a different level of feeling, but we've seen that gone from a dip to there's definitely pent up demand. And yes, it's making sure in that whole entire life cycle of from the specking to delivery that you can service it. So from our vantage point, it might be working overtimes, additional shifts, making sure we can find the right amount of support, the equipment, all those types of things. But
Yeah.
that's the good thing of being in this industry for such a long time. We have a lot of great relationships and smart people that forecasted some of these challenges, and they were able to meet the demands of our customers.
Yeah. Well, it also speaks to a value that we often don't see in the CIO profession, but the value of longevity with a company. For a number of years, it was not unexpected for CIOs to work 2 to 3 years someplace and then move on. And the longer you stay, the more deeply involved you are in the business strategy. And I have a lot of really fascinating conversations with CIOs who are very deeply embedded in their industries because they have been there for a while.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I'm holding up. This is Corn Ferry, and it's talking about analysis of 1,000 largest U.S. companies by revenue, and then it has average age, CEO, CFO, CIO, CMO, Chief Human Resource Officer. So the C-suite average age is 56.
Right.
That's just based upon the study, and the typical tenure in these suites is somewhere around 5 years. If you look at the tenure in our organization, I'm the rookie. I mean, that's what's great.
Years in, you're the rookie.
I'm the rookie. I'm dealing with very seasoned veterans who know this industry inside and out. They've dedicated their life to it, 20, 25, 30 years of experience. But what's great is they're not they're just not sitting on their laurels. They're constantly trying to
Right.
challenge themselves and ourselves within the industry. And I'm a firm believer in, I think that's a challenge that every company has. Think about it.
Mhm.
If you're just constantly shifting how long does it take to really get to understand an industry, right? I
Oh,
mean, that could be several years. And then the technologies that are in that industry, and then how to apply them and who the customers are. So it's a big part of Holman's philosophy that longevity is one of their secrets to success, and culture plays a huge part in that.
well, I think it may also, the fact that it's a family owned and it's a privately owned business. If I were to categorize a lot of the CIOs that I've talked to who are the happiest and the most engaged in their businesses, a lot of times they have landed in privately held or family owned companies where they can really get kind of a mind, we'd call it on Star Trek, a mind meld with the CEO. It just, a few conversations I've had with CIOs who were amazed at how much more quickly they could get stuff done rather than having to go through a lot of layers of, especially in public companies, that focus on the quarterly financials and the focus on all of the committees you have to get through. There's a bit of an astonishment when you can walk into the CEO's office and you lay out your plan. He says, "All right, go do it." I just,
Oh yeah, well, our CEO, it's just a text, email, Zoom session away. We're playing golf actually this Thursday.
good.
It's
Well,
it's his birthday, so we and a couple other gentlemen are playing golf. But no,
yeah,
that's the culture of the organization. It's just very strong, tight knit,
mhm,
and relationships matter. They're,
yes,
they're so important, and that's the other thing. I think it's difficult to develop relationships if people are just revolving in and out.
yeah. Well, and I think it's especially true as you get up to the senior levels. Let us switch back to a question from one of our audience members. Can you discuss your organizational structure, particularly around, and this is a favorite topic of yours, analytics? Is it centralized or decentralized? Do you emphasize self-service, that sort of thing? And I know that the BI and analytics is a real favorite area for you. So let's talk about that.
That's a great question. It's something we cover in week two of our 8-week class, just on how different companies organize. And I guess my comment there, I don't think there's any right way or wrong way.
Hmm.
One of the most important things is having good people and knowing what you really want to do with it. So how we're organized within IT, we have what we're calling an information management discipline. And that discipline has a lot of the basics there. It's where all the data lives, so our database platforms, how we move data from point A to point B, how we assemble it and put it in a semantic layer, a layer that's understandable for our business units. And then at that point, it's within each business, you have business professionals that really understand it. So a financial planning and analysis group, or a group around marketing attribution, which is to me the holy grail of analytics. Where we spend a lot of time and energy is around fleet analytics. So it's dealing with all those customers. And one of the questions I think Mary Fran was asking me about, what was one of the, I wouldn't say challenges, but what are some of the demands you're having in your customers? Data, analytics. They want to know and model out, or at least project, what would this scenario bring, or what would that scenario bring. And that this is where it's really important that this lives within the business, but it's very much interacted or interfaced within technology. So from that point, I would say it's centralized, but in the business, it's federated from the standpoint that each business has their members and expertise, and we have good connectivity between the two.
Okay.
Uh, we cover this in my class all the time. Do you want one version of the truth? That'd be great. but I don't think it's practical to have one. You're going to have multiple versions of the truth, and you need it to need to move at the speed of the business. So
Yeah.
that's always the give and take that you're going to have there. So
Mhm.
yes, we're decentralized as it relates to serving up the business.
Well, and it's great that you brought up customers because our next question is about customers. What kind of investment, or are there investments you'd like to talk about that you're making to improve the customer engagement or that experience? And again, you've got 6 operating companies, so there may be 6 different big ones, but if you have one or two that you
Yeah,
want.
I mean, the one I really want to highlight is around our fleet management, what we're calling mobility as well.
Right.
But that is where we have, and this predated me, and this is a really good idea that we've kept in place, and it's our customer information services team. And what they do, it's a combination. So you've got strong technology professionals and individuals that were in the business that came into CIS. So they've got the customer service skills, presentation skills, learn the technology, a nice blend. I'll call them, term I like to use is a biznologist. They understand the business, they understand the technology, and they can have that dialogue with our clients.
Yeah.
So they work with both our sales reps and as well as our account management, and they're out there and they can at least make real time decisions on, you know what, that's a great idea, or what we're that's on our roadmap. So if you can wait 6 months, you'll get it. Or you know what, if that's something that you want now, maybe we can come up with a way to get it for you.
Okay.
So that's so important for us. And that drives innovation, that drives creativity, that drives really good engagement with our customers. That CIS organization, it's been important and a mainstay within Holman for the last couple decades, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and you talked about how that started before you got there. You've been the CIO since 2015, but you've actually been with the company for 12 years. So you've had a variety of other roles before you.
Yeah, prior to being the CIO for Holman Enterprises, I was the CIO for Automotive Resources International, which is the fleet management aspect. Yep.
All right, yes. Well, and since we've started down the innovation discussion road here, I know that that's a big part of Holman Enterprises for you. Let's talk about the strategic ventures. That is, I've run into a couple of companies that are starting to do that, where they establish a way to look around in the financial industry. It might be fintech. Maybe in your industry, it's auto tech. But tell
Fleet tech, auto tech. Yeah, that sounds good.
tech, car talk is car tech. Tell us about Holman Strategic Ventures, what part of the organization it is, how it works, maybe something about what you're investing in.
Yeah, it's an adjacency to our organization. So these are individuals that have a ton of experience in pretty much every facet that we just talked about, but heavily in the retail side of the business and the fleet
Okay.
management. So the goal of that team was or is to see what we potentially could build outside, but also conversely, as we're building things outside, how to bring either competencies or disciplines in. It could be a specific technology that we bring back, a portion of a service, or even a whole product.
Hmm.
So that takes commitment. That's something is not for the faint of heart. You do a lot of pivoting in those types of engagements where you have idea today and then tomorrow it's a completely different move. I mean, you look at Slack. What was when Slack first started, they were a gaming company, and part of their goal was to be in the gaming space.
Yeah.
Well, in order for all the developers to work together, they said there's not a great collaboration tool that we like. We're developers, we build our own. Hence, they pivoted, and now Slack is pivoted. Same thing here. There's lots of ideas that we think or we see. You go down maybe one path, and it leads you on another path. So it's having a team that's allowed to explore, do the trial and error,
Mm-hmm.
and be in it. Some of these things take time. I would say we didn't formally have this team 10 years ago, but the individuals that are on this team, and one who I'll give him a shout out, his name's Tony Candeloro. He was, I would say, an evangelist for telematics and connected car. And since we're on innovation and things like that, I'll
Oh,
little book here.
all
Stephen
right.
Johnson's 10 years old, but one of the chapters talks about the slow hunch, and innovation doesn't necessarily happen quickly over time. I mean, you might be able to do a little modification, but this thing was a slow hunch that has taken time to develop. and it's a big part of what we do. It's part of that adjacent possible where you can build on a connected car, connected vehicle to have other products and services around it. So their job is to explore. Their job is to see what else is going on out there in
Right.
the industry. Their job is to partner as well. We did a partnership with Cox Automotive and Lyft, where we took the collective experience and ingenuity to these three companies to build a product and service that we took out to the marketplace. So it's it gets into that, and I'll say this is where it's not just a marketing term. We talk about being a learning culture. This is a big part of being a learning culture within the organization. That trial and error, that slow hunch, that willing to just push the status quo.
Yeah. Well, and to keep the open mind and to keep asking questions and to fail fast and then move forward. Now, that book that you just flashed up on the screen there, and we're just, yeah, Steven Johnson's Where Good Ideas Come From. I know that, and this is kind of the professor side of Steve that I want to talk with next.
Well, this is the student side right now. This is from our doctorate program. So
You're also
we can
because you're an adjunct professor and you teach students and you mentor. I want to talk a little bit about the GPS and telematics because telematics is actually a subject you are deeply into as you're working on a doctoral degree in it. So, talk a little bit about that, and then share a few more of those books that are kind of they're the foundation of some of the ways you think about this.
Yeah, we'll get back to the network-centric transportation grid, which is just another acronym, and I think we overdo the acronyms in our. It'll sound more impressive in a dissertation, but it's really moving from human-based internal combustion machines to automated electric machines,
Right.
and a big part of that is the connectivity. So think about it today, what we've done over the last 20 years with computers and with smartphones. Now we're embarking as an industry and as a world on trying to bring all that technology to a vehicle. And there's tons of, I mean, think about it right now. A car is a computer on wheels. If you look at an autonomous vehicle, it has you get up to a level 5, which is fully autonomous. You're talking a billion lines of code. That's a lot of code. I mean, that's Carl Sagan. You're in the billion territory there. So from just a connected standpoint, we have to figure out how it works, but not only how it works, how it potentially might not work, and then what opportunities are in there. So there's payment systems. Think about it from a telematic standpoint. You might be able to, and there's companies that are doing it today or certainly dabbling in it, is tie your credit card right to the telematics device. So no more swipe. You drive by, you might have your whole payment system done or payments done in that way. Well, think about that. That could be really convenient. That could be challenging as well. There could be security implications. So it's what can you do with this connected capability? There's companies out there that are trying to monetize the license plate. So let's have a digital license plate and think about it. Maybe now if you're dealing with things like blockchain or your registration, how would that reinvent the industry? Imagine what could happen to the DMVs and that whole side of the business. Marketing, think about it. You could have a digital license plate, and now maybe when it's sitting there, you can sublet out to market a product or service. So the connected car has all sorts of potential opportunities, from efficiency to serving society, to maybe there'll be challenges along the way because now we've connected them. Imagine we have ransomware in connected cars and your fleet gets bricked. That wouldn't be a good thing. So all these things have to be considered and weighed. And that's a big part of why I picked this topic, because one, strong interest, tremendous amount of value for our organization. There's just so many experts in there that I can work with and bounce ideas off of. So I think this is, it just makes sense as something to
Now, are you far enough
investigate.
with it where you have a thesis that, a basic statement? Because I know that every PhD thesis has to have that elevator pitch.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing. So yeah, right now I'm more in the investigative mode,
Okay.
and it's narrowing down because it's a very broad topic, and to prove it or disprove it one way or the other. It's getting it down to a narrow focus.
That is the fun part, and there's lots of famous writers who have basically had various quotes about how much easier it is to say something in 3,000 words than in 30.
Yeah, Mark Twain, I think, has a favorite quote. He is, "If I knew I was going to write a short letter, I would have spent more time," or something. Yeah,
Exactly.
something like that. Paraphrasing.
Yes. Now, I wanted to circle back just one more time to the C-suite business analytics that you teach at St. Joe's. Have you seen that? Is that changing a great deal at the C-suite level? Not just the interest in business analytics, but the sort of the sort of demands that come onto the IT organization for what's needed. I remember this conversation some years ago where IT leaders were generating all kinds of metrics that nobody on the business side really cared about. The one thing they did care about is if they had downtime on their systems, that sort of thing. So I know it's very important to measure the things that your business colleagues care about most. Has that changed a lot? How do you talk about that?
I try to make it as simple as possible. So typically at the point where my class gets taken is towards the end of the program.
Hmm.
And the students, and when I say students, these are colleagues because these are all different individuals, professionals, but they've learned different tools and they have the toolbox. Now, how do you apply those tools into
Yeah.
what part and where do you reach in the toolbox? And it's more around application and culture.
Hmm.
So it's one thing having the tools. Can your culture absorb it? Are they ready for it? And then where are you applying it? Is this a revenue generate? And this is where it gets really hard. Just like you're asking me, well, what's your thesis going to be on? Same thing. All right, you've got this nebulous term, business analytics. How
Hmm.
are you using it? How are you explaining it? What's the business value? How does it move the needle? And that's a challenge I think a lot of us in the technology industry have. We have so many buzzwords. What does it really mean? How is it simplified? And the big part of the class is simplifying it. So it's
Okay.
taking these use cases and say, if I do these 5 things, how is it really going to help potentially generate revenue? Or how is it going to identify a business opportunity? Or how does it truly show that what we've done in the last 6 months is providing value? I throw out there marketing attribution. That's the holy grail because that's a difficult thing. Go to any marketing professional and ask them, or CEO, all right, what business value have you got out of your marketing campaign? Well, now start working your way back into it. And
Yeah.
just the value of business, think about it. On any balance sheet, where do you see data? Does data show up as an asset, as a liability? I mean, the closest thing you might see is in an intangible asset or intellectual property, but you don't see, but there's so much time and energy that's spent around it. And I think if that was classified and in a way that everybody got, I think you would get a better, I guess,
Mm.
understanding or energy around it. But it's very nebulous, and I don't know if everyone derives the value that they're. What I wouldn't point out to anyone technology vendor, but ask them to truly make a business case on something like an ERP or the business analytics platform, and have them give very concrete examples.
Yeah.
It's tough to do.
It's tough to do. I mean, especially when your biggest focus is on actually moving the product. It's almost like you're asking them to get into a very theoretical realm where they're not going to have those hard business metrics that they can actually give you.
I mean, where we use it primarily is in that fleet management space where
Mm.
you can have those conversations. And the basics is, do you have enough information where you can describe a problem?
Yeah.
You now can you diagnose it? And that's what you have between the customer and ourselves. Let's diagnose what it is. And then based upon it, well, let's forecast or project or predict a couple of different alternatives. And
Yeah.
then we can come up with prescriptions on how to address those. Then the ultimate goal is, and this is where the C-suite business analytics comes into, you can get to all that point, but then how do you persuade the decision makers? And
Yeah.
some of that is art, some of that is culture, some of that is relationship, and tying all these things together.
Well, I really like it, and I'm sure you've heard this too over the years. The CIO title has had lots of words applied to the I part, and when they're talking about it, my favorite one has always been Chief Influence Officer, because that ability to straddle the business strategy and the practical aspects of running the technology organization, the more there's a foot in both camps, kind of the better balanced. And it strikes me too that CIOs even enjoy themselves more when they're able to do that.
No, I agree, Mary Fran. I would add to that a little bit. I would say the technology, the business, the academic side, and then just the behavioral side of it, and making sure you're straddling all those different aspects, because that's part of our job. And that's part of any executive leader's job.
Yes. Well, and let's spend the last few minutes here talking about leadership, because I always like to ask for a few nuggets of brilliant advice to share with either your colleagues or some of the people that you've mentored over the years about leadership. And you had a wonderful way you were approaching it. And it was about, I'm trying to sourcing for success or sourcing for distress. And I thought that was, and you didn't even try to make up any new words with this one. So I want you to tell us about what those two approaches mean to you as a leader.
Yeah, I think it's just being honest with yourself when you walk into a situation, knowing, take inventory. Where are you good, and maybe where do you have some blind spots?
Okay.
There's a gentleman in our organization. His name's Bob Hamilton, and he has a role. It's captain communicator. And his job is to engage constantly within our organization. So he's way better at it than I am. I can't hold a candle to him. He's just tremendous. During the pandemic so far, he's done 170 one-on-ones with the various professionals within our organization. He does a weekly, I would say, communication meeting with all of our organization. We've had guest speakers in and out. So I'm just using this as an illustrative, but if communication is your strong point, great, then utilize it. If it's an area that's a blind spot, which it is with me, Bob's fantastic. Let each person really shine. And that's the sourcing for success. Just go around, take inventory, and maximize people's strengths, and let them go and let them shine. He's done an amazing job. And there's other examples that within the organization, but just be humble, know where you got some challenges or blind spots, and let other people fill in those gaps and do a good job for you.
Well, I don't know. From where I'm sitting, I don't think you have a huge blind spot around being a communicator. I think you actually explain yourself very well. Now, so I mentioned the sourcing for success and for distress. What is the distress
Yeah,
part?
I think the stress is, and that's, once again, projects get started and many times aspirational, hopeful, but really go through it. Play devil's advocate. Similar to the example you gave earlier about, hey, well, the CIO saw this issue and sent it out to other folks and use this as a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Really walk through it. I'm not saying throw a wet blanket on anything, but on the flip side, be honest. What do we need? What have we done in other areas? Get counter arguments. Get different perspectives. Really collectively look at it if you're going to walk into a big initiative. And I'm talking some larger projects, but same thing. Stretch assignments are great. Know when it's a time to apply the stretch assignment versus, all right, we can't have 3 people on stretch assignments for this initiative. As much as we'd love to, we truly need to overclub it a little bit in each area, and have that dialogue across the board. And this is where I like that look back and look ahead. You're keeping each other honest in a nice way, the accountability and the measurements. It's not that hard. It's just a matter of being in the discipline and having the dialogue and communicate up front.
Yeah. Well, and as my just final question, I wanted you to quickly show some of those books that are right there in your stack. I love that you showed up for our interview today with a couple of props, things that you can show. So tell us, these are books that have had an impact on you as a leader, and that you.
Yeah, I think it's a good book. So one of them, Applied Artificial Intelligence, talks about the machine intelligence continuum.
Yes.
And just very simple examples of artificial intelligence. Once again, I think we overhype terms and words, and we just need to explain things in a simple way. Book I love here is from Peter Thiel, 0 to 1.
Okay.
And what I like about this, and I use this all the time in everything that I do, but he asks 7 questions that a startup should ask and answer, and I would say in any initiative. And this gets more into the sourcing success.
That's great.
Do you have the secret question? What I would say, do you have the potential solution? You have the engineering question answered, meaning, can you actually do it? The people question is so important. This gets into the sourcing for success. Do you have the right amount of people? Is it the right time to do it? So is the timing there? He asked the monopoly question. I would just say that's more, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to generate revenue, efficiency, whatever it might be? And then the durability and the distribution. Can this stand the test of time? And can you actually move it out within your industry? So I think it's a good book. And then the last one I'll pitch here is Infonomics, and it's how to monetize data. Really great examples in here. A lot on Internet of Things, how to leverage Internet of Things. And it's a good way to take a step back and see what you're doing with your data. The question we had earlier on centralized versus decentralized, building an organization around data, it's covered in this book as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that maybe in future Leadership Lives, I may require everyone to show up with a couple of good books that they can recommend. I think people that are in a constant learning mode and are always trying to improve as leaders often are also readers. So thank you so much. And it's been a great conversation today, Steve. I've really appreciated having you on.
It was nice speaking with you, Mary Fran, and thanks everybody else out there. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Now, if you joined us for our show late, you can watch the full episode later today on both CIO.com or on our YouTube channel. And please take a moment to subscribe to the YouTube channel that IDG runs. It's called IDG Tech Talk. You can also catch my conversation with Steve and with the previous several dozen CIOs I've interviewed over the last few years. We're also audio podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did with CIO Steve Heindel of Holman Enterprises, and that you'll join me in 2 weeks for our next episode of CIO Leadership Live, which will be on November 18th, when I'll be talking again at 12 noon Eastern, and I'll be joined by CIO Nicole Raimundo of the city of Cary, North Carolina. Thanks so much for tuning in today, and thanks again to my colleagues at CIO.com and the CIO Executive Council for their sponsorship of this wonderful program, CIO Leadership Live. Stay safe and well out there, and we'll see you here next time.